Hello, and thank you for joining us this new year at the Hebrew Bible Institute. My name is John Lyons. I'm here with my good friend Savannah Carlson and Pastor Sasha Bolotnikov. Today, we want to answer a few questions about God's love and about the nature of grace. Now, a lot of people have this idea that grace is more of a New Testament thing, not so much an Old Testament thing. Sasha, where would you like to take us in response to that kind of thinking?
Well, this is a very interesting subject about the grace because people often refer to John chapter 1. And we just finished this gospel. And in John chapter 1, it says, the law came from Moses, and a grace came from Jesus Christ. And because people read often, that's in my personal opinion is a big mistake. People read often starting from the New Testament, Christian tradition, especially Protestant and evangelical tradition, was highlighting the New Testament. That's how it happened that grace began to be pitted against the law. Even within our denomination, there is this discussion, which I constantly hear, when we don't fully understand the nature of our own legalism, we just pit the grace against the law. And it's a mistake. And the reason why I'm glad that this quarterly starts actually with a passage which is in Exodus chapter 33, verses we can say 15 and 16, maybe all the way to 17.
Okay. Then he said to him, "If your presence does not go with us, do not bring us up from here. For how then will it be known that your people and I have found grace in your sight, except you go with us? So we shall be separate, your people and I, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth." So the Lord said to Moses, "I will also do this thing that you have spoken, for you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name."
Yeah, so this is a first-time usage of the word grace and it's actually not the first time in the Old Testament. It's not the first time. So just let's pause here a little bit. When you hear the word grace, what do you understand? What's it associated?
I associate with the Thanksgiving tradition of let's say grace before we begin the meal, among other things.
For me, it's something that I've been working on as a mom, is extending grace to myself, being kind when I can't accomplish everything, giving myself the latitude to make mistakes and grow as a human being. So that's where my mind goes.
I see. That's kind of an interesting... that's an interesting take. Actually, I'm thinking, comparing, my Russian word for grace and English. An English word for grace is very, very broad. If you take, goes all the way back. I watched this serial on Henry VIII, and it's like, Your Majesty, Your Grace.
Yeah.
I don't know how they implied that kind of thing, but then we have a grace period.
Yes. Before you get in trouble.
Yeah, that's right. So grace is kind of something that gets you out of trouble, out of punishment, and unfortunately, what very often happens in Christian theology, since the time of Luther, it's defined as undeserved mercy, or in some softer term, unmerited favor, which the Bible does not support this definition. Not that God doesn't do us unmerited favor. I don't know, in your life, in my life, many times God was so merciful to me when I for sure messed up, in little things. Throughout my life. And we can see in the Bible. Take, for example, Jacob and Rachel and Leah situation. Leah definitely was shown to Jacob after the first night. Okay, she is now your wife. She bears children. Rachel doesn't. Finally, Rachel gives birth to Joseph and then to Benjamin. So it's a mercy to Rachel. But grace is something different. And very first usage of the word grace, in fact, the reason why sometimes English translations are interesting. I'm glad you, Savannah, read in New King James. It's more literalistic because in many instances, what's in your translation, John?
Favor.
Favor,
is the word.
Which is kind of a little bit of a problem for me because it's not consistent. The Hebrew word han, that's what it represents. And it's actually very well attested, to be translated into Greek as charis, which is grace. And so sometimes translators into English, as I noticed, they're not consistent. They, at their own theological perception, may say grace or may say favor to avoid, because then when I see a translation like New NIV, not that NIV is bad, but I noticed on NIV, when I see them doing using the word favor, they're trying here to fit it with their preset theology and their view of grace, which I am trying here to debunk.
Sure.
Okay? So let's go to the first usage of the word han, which is grace, in Genesis chapter 6, verse 8. I am curious what the English translations are going to say.
So I'm still in the New King James Version.
Yeah.
It says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord."
And mine says favor.
But
I like grace a lot more in this context.
Absolutely.
It seems more fitting to me.
How so?
Well, when you look at the story of Noah and the relationship that he must have had with God in the midst of this time where almost the entire world has just given themselves over to do whatever they think is right and has completely transgressed not only the law, but any kind of relationship that they could have with God, we see Noah, who very clearly, as demonstrated by his actions, is still willing to obey the commands of the Lord to the best of his ability. But God shows him grace because even Noah is a sinner, right? Noah deserves the same thing that everyone else deserved, which was to get swept away by the flood.
Very interesting perspective, but take a look at this. And is Noah, do you think, absolutely the same as these guys? Take a look at verse 5.
Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continuously.
Let's contrast it with Noah, verse 9.
This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God.
Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God. But is he blameless and righteous because he found grace in the sight of the Lord?
It is an interesting question, John, because when we look at blameless, righteous, wow, we
Job
see,
comes to mind.
yeah. But take a look at explanation. What does it mean to be blameless and righteous? The blameless and righteous is explained by the next phrase. Noah walked with God.
And we see also later in the Bible that when we walk with God, God gives us his grace so that we can be in his presence.
Exactly. Grace. So this term walking here is interesting because there is a Hebrew word for go. Go is like go. I go to the store. Here, it's like can be walked with God, or it can be even translated, Noah habitually was taking strolls with God. In English, in Hebrew, there is no analogy to the English word relationship. So lehid halech is to have a stroll. That's how the biblical Hebrew presents to us the modern concept of relationships. So he is righteous and blameless because he has a relationship with God. And that's how he finds grace. So grace is, and it's very interesting because anytime you're going to see in the Old Testament this phrase, it's always going to be phrased like this, grace in the eyes of. So there was this story of the foolish man who didn't want to give anything to David, and Abigail, his wife, came and she said, if I find grace in your eyes. And then later David marries her because she found grace in her eyes. It's like finding grace. It's another way to, in the eyes is to explain, basically God loved Noah. There was a relationship with them. And that's what made him, it doesn't say Noah was sinless.
Right.
But this is right from here. This is how it's shown that this is how we're getting saved.
Through grace.
Yeah. So it is absolutely incorrect to think that Old Testament teaches that we're saved by the deeds of the law. And New Testament teaches that we're saved by the deeds of grace. Because if we go to this paradigm, then it means that grace is just you are no longer obligated. It's just you're free from certain obligations. You're no longer, you used to be obligated. You couldn't do it. Like you used to have a house and you were paying mortgage, obligated to pay. Now you don't have to pay mortgage. This isn't about the obligation. This is about relationship.
Right, because when Jesus came, you talked earlier about how in John it says that Jesus was grace and, the Old Testament's the law kind of thing, right? What Jesus actually came to do was to turn that upside down and say, you don't have relationship with God through law. You have relationship with God, which allows you to fulfill the requirements of the law. And it's backwards with Christ teaching that. And based on the historical context, that was very important because of the extremity to which people had gone to follow the law and adding rules and making it almost impossible. And that relationship with God then became distant or unsustainable.
Yes, the biggest problem in Judaism was and still is, the absence of relationship with God. In fact, not only Judaism, basically, when we do not believe in relational God, this is deism.
Yep.
Yeah, so God is somewhere out there. And that's the main reason. It wasn't that Jews were, in Judaism, Pharisees were doing something, adding the rules because they were trying to be saved and earn their salvation. They were doing it because they believed that God is out there.
Yeah.
And he gave us the right to rule over the Torah. And that's why they were doing it. They were doing it on their own ways. It was their way to control. But that's why Jesus comes, and that's the reason why God makes this kind of plan to come in human form to show the relationships.
Right. God with us.
Yes, God with us. That's the relationship.
And when John is saying that Jesus is the bringer of grace, he's actually talking about Jesus brought it back to the forefront.
Yes.
That grace has always been there, and Christ is reminding us of the importance.
Yes. So Jesus is the one through whom we can understand the relational God better.
Yes.
That's why grace and law are it's oranges and apples, Law is the measure of, it's how we know what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's evil.
Right.
And yeah, it came through Moses. But it is Jesus who is showing us how to build a relationship with God.
Yes.
So they're not pitted against each other. And so when we go back to Exodus 33, it is very important here to note how finally God explains what it means you found a grace. Can we read again Exodus 33:17?
So the Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have spoken, for you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name.
Yeah. So here God explains what does it mean, Moses found grace. I know you by name. And knowing someone by name in the ancient Near Eastern concept is, I know you very well.
It's an intimate thing.
Yes. So, it is absolutely inappropriate in Arab culture to ask your friend, what's your wife's name?
Rather, you would refer to her by the name of her firstborn son?
Yeah, that's
Like mother of John?
Yeah. We had, I don't know if I told you the story, but I have a guide in Jordanian. She is a Russian guide. Her name is Natasha. But anytime we're in Jordan, she speaks to the group in Russian, she always says, don't say publicly my name, Natasha. Refer to me as Firas, mother of Firas. That's the name of my firstborn son.
Interesting. Makes sense. That's how she would survive in that culture.
Well, that's the way how they do,
Exactly.
The first, only a husband can address and talk to a wife using her first name because that's the intimate, and then the rest, it shows the level, the boundaries of intimacy in Arab culture.
Right. Well, speaking of names of children and the relational nature of God, I think this is a perfect time to transition to the book of Hosea.
Oh, yes.
Okay, we're reading from Hosea 14, verses 1 through 4. O Israel, return to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all iniquity. Receive us graciously, for we will offer the sacrifices of our lips. Assyria shall not save us. We will not ride on horses, nor will we say any more to the work of our hands, you are our gods. For in you the fatherless finds mercy. I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned away from him. And verse 5, I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall grow like the lily and lengthen his roots like Lebanon.
Yeah. So this is a very, very conclusion of the book of Hosea, which is a very difficult book. Actually, it's one of the most difficult books of the Bible because starting from chapter 4, it's just a poem. And Hosea lives in the northern kingdom of Israel, right before the time when these northern tribes, 9 tribes, like Manasseh, Ephraim, Naphtali, whatever, are going to be basically deported to, Assyria, and we don't have them. These tribes are, some people have all kinds of weird theories about them, some in Afghanistan, some fine, but the reality, we don't have them, except those who ended up in Jerusalem, the refugees, but the reason for it, it's here in verse 1, it says Samaria, which is the capital of the northern kingdom, will be destroyed. In fact, it was destroyed so much that archaeologists still debate where is it. Actually, we don't have any kind of, there are plenty of ruins which are excavated.
Right.
But
potential places, but
we don't know for sure which one it is.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We don't know. But it's the appeal here, come back, Israel, to the Lord, and I will save you no matter what. And there was really, the northern kingdom was really brutally unfaithful to God. They basically apostatized right away. The king Jeroboam put these 2 golden calves. He literally forbade his citizens to even go to the temple and worship the Lord in Jerusalem. So it was brutal. But God was very merciful here, and He is promising, come back. Come back, Israel. He's calling Israel to come back. And the most why the book of Hosea is so brutal, because of how Hosea actually is portraying God's feeling. And you can read verse 2, chapter 1, Hosea 1, verse 2, and you will see what's going on.
When the Lord began to speak by Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, "Go, take yourself a wife of harlotry and children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord."
Yeah, so on the one hand, the symbolism is clear. Israel, which apostatized into idolatry, phonetic combination is good here, is viewed by God as adulterous wife. And so God wants to show to Israel how it feels through the life of Hosea, his prophet. So he wants Hosea to be kind of like a living, to play out in his own life, how God feels. So he says, go and marry a woman of harlotry. So this is a interesting part here, because we have 2 major words in Hebrew. One word is nepha, meaning adultery, and that refers to marital unfaithfulness. That's this commandment number 7. And the other one is znut, which is harlotry. So here...
So what is... Sorry, maybe
Go
I'm
ahead,
interrupting, but I'm curious, what is then the distinction?
Well, I assume the first is the unfaithful in marriage, and harlotry is prostitution in or outside of marriage.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's a broader term.
Yeah, it is. It is a broader term, and of course, in today's society, can be anything. Somebody just lives and having all kinds of dates and sexual encounters. Somebody, as you mentioned, is doing a prostitution. All kinds of way. This is all znut. And of course, very often we think of prostitution like a red light district Amsterdam type, with all this European. They even have their union now. Unbelievable how it's all. But it was legalized even in the Middle Ages. It's funny, I've read that Catholic Church actually officially legalized prostitution to the point that they knew, like they were arguing like this: men need some outlets and blah, blah, blah. So they would allow, and these poor girl need the way to eat. So they would allow, brothels. Brothels would pay taxes to the city. And what happens after these poor women finished their work and ready for retirement with all kinds of diseases, monasteries would take them. They would make perfect nuns, for the rest of their life, just praying for remission of their sins. That was the system.
Wow.
But this is not what we're talking here.
Right.
We're talking here Cultic harlotry. A Cultic harlotry is, remember how in the Old Testament God often speaks about, the holy trees and the groves and stuff like this. This was the most terrible thing. Often we don't understand why God told Joshua to drive all these Canaanites out, at any cost. Think about this. You got your village, you're trying to live a good life for your family, and you have, every Sabbath, you worship the Lord, you're teaching your kids, and now your kids are teenagers. And down the hill in a valley, you see a pagan Canaanite village. And if you look down from your house, you're going to see a grove. And periodically, everybody is coming to this grove, drunk from wine and whatever, intoxicated, having a music and party, and having an open view for the sex. How long will it take before your teenage kids will be tempted to go and try it?
Yeah, of course.
This is dangerous. I remember I made one mistake, everybody laughed, but it was actually not a mistake. In one of the presentations I was doing I forgot something, I was putting I had the word Portland long time before I moved there, but I made a mistake and put the letter N.
Yes.
Everybody laughed, but it wasn't funny when I moved there. Because I discovered every single block downtown Portland would have a strip club.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually used to live in Portland as a child. And I have, vivid memories of just the things that I would see on billboards and just the magazines that were in hospital waiting rooms. As a child, I was like, why is this here? I should not be exposed to this,
Well, I'm glad that even though you were exposed to this, you had enough brain and Holy Spirit to not to be enticed by this.
So basically, Hosea was marrying a woman who had been performing these acts.
Oh yeah, for worship.
Sure.
because and it's terrible because these are not the Canaanite woman. In this time it's most likely his country, that's his neighbor, the same village. But she was doing it. She was serving this probably the Ashtoreth, the wife of Baal. That's the Canaanite or Sidonite maybe. The Jezebel brought them in, and so these children are, from all different men. She had a worship, quote unquote, together. Sure. And God says, take her in. And, this is terrible. Mm. And, then she bears children. Take a look at couple names. So like, how do you like to call your daughter this way? Verse 6.
And she conceived again and bore a daughter. Then God said to him, call her name Lo Ruhamah, for I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away.
Yeah, and Lo Ruhamah, it's not just even mercy. It's, Raham, it's one of the it's a motherly love, because in Hebrew there is a noun rechem, which means uterus, and so Raham, it's like, you cuddle, that's...
So no motherly love.
Yeah. That's the type. But often, there's a big discussion about this, about God and his attribute, because one of he has two attributes. It's called always together, Rahum veChanun. Chanun, it's come hen, grace, and Rahum is this type of cuddling love. Mm-hmm.
Mm. So, why would God do this to a man of God, to a prophet? Why would he put him in this situation, and then not only put the man in this situation, but then have him name his children these sad, demoralizing names?
This is not the first time when God is doing this with the prophet, and that just demonstrates the scope of prophetic ministry, because prophets all to communicate, the classical prophets, not like Daniel, who is apocalyptic visionary, and it's through the dreams. Prophets very often, would come with a musical instrument and sing publicly all the revelations that God gave. So all this, most of the text, even in Hosea, here it's basically like a story, but the rest of the book is gonna be his songs, and that's songs of where he is going to demonstrate his family struggle. Here he gets all to adopt and feed all these all these children. And when we look at the family struggle he is having, take a look here, chapter 3, verses 1 through 3.
Then the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by a lover and is committing adultery, just like the love of the Lord for the children of Israel who look to other gods and love the raisin cakes of the pagans. So I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and 1 1/2 homers of barley. And I said to her, you shall stay with me many days. You shall not play the harlot, nor shall you have a man. So too will I be toward you.
So it's kind of an interesting situation. When, let's say, someone comes to me as a pastor and says, Pastor, I know and there is enough proof my husband is unfaithful to me and I am suffering greatly from this. I would say to her, look, sister, you definitely are free to do divorce, and God is not, there is no guilt on your side, divorce, be careful to marry somebody who will surely love you. So, in general. But I did have many cases like this, but I did have some cases where I would have this. Pastor, thank you for your advice, but I love her so much that I will keep fighting for our relationship. Not all these fights gain victory, but some I know do. And the other side of the other half in the family come to the senses and to repentance. And the suffering side has enough strength to forgive and continue. So this text is very interesting. I don't know, like in New King James, it says, God tells me, go again. This is not the only meaning of this little particle od. It's very broad particle. It's not go again like. And because of this mistranslation, many people begin to think of how it happened, because like, oh, he already married, what else? She left him, what do you do? No, this is not go again.
What is
this? It's basically nevertheless. So in spite that she is who she is. It's the same repetition of chapter 1. It's just from a different angle. That back then he explains why to Hosea why he wants him to do it. But here he says, nevertheless, do it. I know it hurts. She is this way and that way. Do it nevertheless. And so he buys her. Look at how, why is he buying her, by the way? He's paying the bride price. Do you think it's a lot?
Doesn't seem like it.
What does it mean then? The guy is poor.
The guy that he's buying her from? Or that
he's the family.
Paying?
It's a low-class family situation. He's paying the bride price, not like Abraham was sending to pay for Rebecca this on massive amount of gold. That one is just 15 shekels of silver, just a little bit here and there. So they're extremely poor. So Hosea lives in poverty. And nevertheless, he says, hey, come and I will love you the way how you are. And then he explains why he does what he does. Let's read verses 4 and 5.
For the Israelites will live many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or household goods. Afterward, the Israelites will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. That was the NIV.
Yeah, that's fine. But the idea of return. So sons of Israel will return. To demonstrate this, the second part should also be in his family life. So the first part in his family life is he is stepping over the boundaries to accept this adulterous woman, but then something changes in her, and they seem to be very much, returning back. She returns to her. So basically, this is a great illustration. If Hosea is able to marry this kind of woman and have a family in such a poverty with love and grace, how much divine love can transform and make this return. And that's why at the very end of the book, he says, God is merciful. God is merciful. Just come to your senses. He will not reject.
Praise God.
Amen.
Well, thank you again for joining us. We hope that we will all walk with God moving forward, that we may also become blameless in his sight. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend that you think would enjoy this, and we'll see you next time.